All right. All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Good? Good. All right. You got any questions about anything? Um. Homework, quiz, anything coming up? Any questions in general? About life? No? Or any wisdom on anyone today? No, I don't. My wisdom is very relative. It depends on the topic. All right, no questions, nothing? Everybody good? How was 4th of July? All right, so, nobody did anything exciting? No? Anybody leave town? Nobody left town? Everybody just stayed here? Fireworks at home?
I was in Washington.
Washington DC or Washington State?
Well, I came for an event, July
Which one?
1st.
Washington State or
Yeah,
Washington?
at Tacoma, Washington
Tacoma?
State.
Okay. What are you doing there?
I was there for July 4th. It was a
Okay.
lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad you're the first time there.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's a pretty fun place. Not too bad. I'm glad you had a good time. All right. Anyone had any questions? No good times to be had? No one got drunk, got arrested, nothing like that? Yes. Pick up the pace. Come on, man. Hey, you guys are young. So like, all right, who's got the? Let's see, who's logged in here? All right, Antonio. Gotcha. Okay. All right. So week 2. Just quick comment about week 1, Ellie. Everybody did a pretty good job on it. All right. I wasn't too harsh on the grading. Usually with opinion pieces, I tend to just kind of like, okay, read what you wrote and not really looking for any real you know, let's say grammatical or any format things, right? If you are, writing something, make sure you format in the sense of having paragraphs. All right, just don't give me one long run-on sentence. That's what it looks like. It's very hard to read. So break it up, try to keep your paragraphs, focused on a particular topic or issue that you're trying to convey. Move on to the next thing, new paragraph, okay? This week, I'm expecting a little bit more citing, right? Some people did in-text cite, excuse me. So I appreciate that. But, this week as we move forward, if it's not an opinion piece, I'm looking for citations, right? I'm looking for,
We need citations.
huh?
We didn't need citations for the first one?
No, not really, because it was more of an opinion piece, but if you did it, I appreciate it. That's good. That's okay. That's all right. It's not like you wasted time or anything.
Okay, yeah, cause I had to. They from the I can't, I need
A little bit.
for my opinion.
Yeah, no, a little bit, it helps if you have an opinion piece and you cite. Cause it just gives more credence to, hey, somebody else is thinking like me, right? Even though it's my opinion, but there's other people with opinion, that's what we call anecdotal. Right? Like, hey, without doing any real research, you're going through the same experience, you're experiencing the same thing, you're experiencing the same thing. I haven't actually studied it, but I'm getting an idea or some inclination that anecdotally, you guys are having the same kind of issue, right? So I can kind of glean stuff from that, and then I can go in depth when I'm talking about research and actually studying the topic, right? So no worries, but everybody did pretty well. Everybody turned in on time for the most part, okay? So just to clear up some confusion, Sunday is not the day for turn-in. Wednesday, 11:59 p.m. is the initial post. And then you have up until Sunday to do your additional 2 responses to your colleagues, all right? I didn't take any points off this week because I already gave you guys till Friday. And basically I looked at Saturday and there were a couple people that, turned in on Sunday, but I didn't ding you for that either, all right? But moving forward, let's, stay on top of it. There's no Wednesdays, 11:59, and then Sundays, everything else is due at that point, all right? Okay, so today, we're really gonna cover some of the more important aspects of HR and strategic management. And really trying to figure out, okay, how, what does HR do and how they do it, okay? So for the most part, HR is really focused on the laws, the regulation, the legislation that is out there provided by the government, right? Department of Labor, and their rules, okay? And so there's different levels of rules, all right? We have federal statutes, we have local, state statutes, we have city statutes, we have, local ordinances and that kind of thing, right? But for HR, really, it's about the federal statutes, right? The acts, all right? And I'm sure a lot of you already, heard about them or maybe have dealt with them before, right? But HR takes kind of its marching orders from the Department of Labor and some of the guidelines or some of the things that's been put out by the executive branch, okay? And we talk about the president's office and all that stuff, right? And so we have certain rules and regulations that help us do the HR job, okay? Whenever there's a situation, the first thing you should think about is, okay, what rule, what act, what legislation, what statute applies to this, okay? And how does it fit within that framework? It's kind of like being a lawyer somewhat, okay? Lawyers, they look at the case, they try to pull out the merits and say, is there a statute or some precedent that's already been established that I can use to convey this point, or to support this particular point, all right? And so HR is the same way. As I said last week, HR doesn't make any decisions. We just kind of go, see what's out there, what's the situation, and after that, we make an evaluation as to what's the best course of action based on the rules and the latitude we have within those rules, all right? It gets gray and kind of fuzzy sometimes, depending on the situation, because, you got people involved, you have emotions. People sometimes think more with their heart than their brain, right? Pragmatic, thinking is probably more of an emphasis in HR than anything else, but at the same time, if you're going to a court proceeding or mediation or arbitration, right? And the person's been done wrong, but legally, nothing's been done wrong, all right? Then what do you do in that situation, right? This is where the ethical leadership comes in. This is where your moral judgment and your value system kind of kicks in. Like, okay, yes, we know we didn't do anything illegal, but at the same time, we may have dumped, just enough chemicals in that water to make you sick, okay? We're not gonna admit that, but we're gonna give you some money, right? We're gonna take care of the bill or whatever the case may be, right? This is kind of what you see, come on in. This is kind of what you see in most lawsuits, all right? But they take forever, okay? So really, we're talking about, okay, making sure we provide an environment where everybody has an equal opportunity at employment, okay? So within the Department of Labor, we have the EEO, okay, Equal Employment Opportunity Office, or the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, right? Which is the governing body that kind of lays down the rules. They make sure that, that things are being enforced, that companies are following the rules and doing the right things by employees. And if something were to happen as far as like having to, put together a lawsuit or some kind of issue, then the EEOC steps in, okay? But there's certain rules for that, all right? The company has to have 15 or more people, different acts like the Age Discrimination Act, there has to be 20 or more people, okay? So if a company has 14 people, they're not subject to really any of this stuff, okay? The notion is that because the company is so small that any real conflicts can probably be solved at the lowest level or with the owner or whoever the powers may be, right? The other issue is if you have a company that's private, things are a little different than a publicly traded company, right? And so there's other issues along the lines of those, right? But when we talk about really, making sure that the rules are enforced, the EEO or EEOC is what makes it happen. Why is everybody laughing? Anybody smiling? Did something happen? No? Okay, I'm just, all right, maybe you guys are smiling, all right? I see the looks of you, I was like, something, did I say something funny? I was like, I need to know. No, nothing? All right, okay. Don't mind me just asking. So the EO makes sure that, things are getting done right, companies are following the rules. The labor force or the workforce is getting treated, appropriately, right? And if there's any grievances or any issues that arise in the workplace, that we have, somewhere to go to, right? Aside from your immediate supervisor, next step is HR, after that is the EEO. Okay, and I'm sure some of you have dealt with the EEO, right? The equal employment officer or equal employment person within your particular company, right? Now, everything I'm saying is relative to United States. Okay, every country has their own set of rules. I think probably the closest to our system is things themselves that they do differently, okay? Labor force, right? Which, is pretty good based on, the first thing that we would, huh, that's weird. All right. One of those days, huh? Hmm. Okay. All right. Apologize about that. All right. So within the workplace, really one of the major issues is discrimination. Okay. And so when it comes to discrimination, there's what we call the protected classes. All right. And there's about 6 or 7 of those. Right. So we're talking about religion. Okay. We're talking about race, talking about gender, sexual orientation, creed. Okay. And there's a whole bunch of other ones that are kind of loosely in there, right? That we, make sure that people are based or judged based on their merits and not based on some physical characteristic, right? That they had no control over. No one here had any control over, how they were born, right? So why should we be judged on that, right? But this is our society. That's what happens. We do get judged on that. But in the workplace, we try to make it as fair as possible. The problem is that, you have people involved, right, who have differing, perspectives on, ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, all this other stuff, right? And so every, instance is different, but discrimination really in the workplace is what we're trying to prevent or try to mitigate as much as possible, okay? All right. All right, so I talked about the protected classes already, okay? Let's see here. All right. So as I mentioned before, different statutes, right, at different levels, right? Federal statutes enacted by Congress, state and city government, and then you got the courts, right? The courts interpret the laws and they kind of hand out whatever punishment is gonna come down, right? The judicial branch, okay? But for the most part, all the rules and the laws that we, are governed by come from Congress, right? Congress puts together a bill, gets sent to the president, goes to the Senate, of course, and then the president says yay or nay, right? Because the president has veto power, and the president, gets overridden because of 2/3 majority. The House or the Senate says, whatever president, it passes, okay? And so, that is really at the highest level where we kind of, get all our rules from, right? Our rules that we play by in the workforce, okay? I'm not gonna delay too much into some of these government agencies, right? Department of Labor, of course, you want to know about. EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, you want to be familiar with, right? The EEO, right? I would recommend you seek out the EEO within your organization, whoever that person may or may not be, every company should have, you feel like you have an issue, okay? And more likely, at some point in your career, you probably will run into an issue, okay? Whether it be a boss that isn't really treating you fairly, or a coworker that you're having problems with, right? Or just the culture itself of the organization may not necessarily be the best, right? And so you'll see that across the board in different cases that are, kind of out there in the public domain, in situations where, there's sexual harassment or there's discrimination, based on, race or whatever the case may be. Matter of fact, there was an article I was reading today. The young man, he put in a resume, an application for a job. He's African American. And his name, I guess it was easy to tell that he was African American. I don't know. And then he got denied for the job. He changed his name, same application, and he got hired. Okay? It happens all the time, right? Unfortunately, our society is just that way, right? And so he's filing a case. He's suing the company, all right? Instead of taking the job, he's going to sue the company because they discriminated against him because of that. Although he's not working for the company, all right, he still gets to sue him because he was in the candidate pool. They discriminated against him because of his race, because they assumed they knew what his race was because of his name. And just to prove him wrong, he switched it up and sent it in with another name, and he got the job. All right. So it is definitely pervasive. It's out there. And you just gotta keep an eye out for it. But you will probably deal with that. And you probably dealt with it and not know. Right? You probably have been in a situation across the board. Okay. Being a minority is very specific to where you're at. Okay. I went to historically black college university for my undergraduate degree, and our pharmacy program, we had a lot of Caucasian, we had a lot of Chinese, but the school was predominantly black, right? Probably 95% black, and the minorities were the folks in the pharmacy program who were there because we had a great pharmacy program. But at the end of the day, they're considered minorities, right? They get the minority scholarships and they get all this stuff. So it works both ways, right? It's not just about, hey, you're a minority because you're, African American, or you're, Spanish, or whatever the case may be. You can be white and be minority also. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right. So government agencies, EEO, Department of Labor. Okay, gets all the rules down, or whatever the case may be. All right. So first concept we're going to talk about is disparate treatment. Okay, and disparate treatment is more focused on individual. Okay, when we talk about someone honing in on someone because they are, a woman, because they're Muslim, right? And your boss or the person that's messing with them is just like focused on that person alone, that's disparate treatment, okay? Then we have something called disparate impact, all right? And disparate impact is more of, it affects a greater amount of people, okay? So for example, when it comes to disparate impact, all right, it's a little bit harder to really pinpoint because in most cases it's unintentional. People don't mean to be discriminatory in practice when they have disparate impact, but it happens. So let's say, for instance, I'm the CEO of a company and I decide that I'm spending too much money in utilities when it comes to the bathroom. And I decide I'm gonna take out the toilets, right? I'm gonna take out the toilets, right? Okay, cool, no problem, okay? I mean, you got a problem, but you don't, right? So at the end of the day, I'm okay, right? Doesn't bother males, right? Men, for the most part, okay, well, good. But what about the women, right? That CEO, whoever made that decision, did not mean to intentionally discriminate against them, but they did. Okay, discrimination does not have to be intentional for it to occur, and you can still face a lot of issues, legal issues, regardless if it's intentional or unintentional. Sir.
Let's say, for example, if there was a situation like an employee needed like a day off for some religious holiday,
Mhm.
the manager or whoever didn't know that it was because of religious reasons,
Mhm.
and they didn't agree to it. Would that count in disparate
Disparate impact? No. What's the key thing you said that makes it not discrimination.
He didn't know.
He didn't know.
It was up to the employee to let him know
Yeah.
it was for religious reasons.
You have to inform the employer of your situation. If you don't inform your employer, you can't really blame them for saying no, because you didn't give me all the information, right? Once that information's been garnered, then at that point, yes. Right? But we have, laws in place for that, and most companies are pretty, sensitive to that, and they'll give off, and depending on the state too, right? I'm from New York, Ramadan and Yom Kippur and all the Jewish holidays are all
You get days off.
days off. Okay, doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not. It's just New York. That's just the way we do it, all right? You come to other places like here in California, I never knew Caesar Chavez was a holiday. Yeah, Caesar Chavez is a holiday.
This is, the San Diego holiday.
Yeah, who's your Caesar Chavez is a holiday, right? Here,
I didn't know that.
yeah, here, right?
What day is that?
She don't ask me. I don't remember. It's sometime in September, I think.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometime in
Yeah, they do
September.
like a big thing
close
for you.
everything, like,
They do a big celebration for
Yeah.
you.
It depends on, again, on the school, right? Martin Luther Jr. King is a holiday, right? Juneteenth is a holiday. Right? It's a federal holiday,
We don't get it off yet.
right? They got it off this year, right? Got it off this year. So what I'm saying is, back to your question is, they need to be informed, right? They need to know, like, hey, this is what's going on, and then they will afford them that opportunity. If they don't afford that opportunity as far as, respecting their religious practices, then there's gonna be some issues, right? Unless it's clearly stated that you need to be a certain way for this job. Okay, and we're gonna get down the line on that, right? But we're talking about business necessity, BFOQs, bona fide occupational qualifications and things of that nature, right? If I tell you like, hey, you'll get, then just use the case now that I'm familiar with, right? Abercrombie and Fitch. Everybody's familiar with Abercrombie and Fitch, right? What kind of image is Abercrombie and Fitch? What's
Model.
the model?
Yeah,
Okay.
thin, abs,
Right.
beach.
Athletic, right? Okay. So there was a case here, a long time ago, but young lady went to Abercrombie and Fitch, got hired, right? She was Muslim, she wore hijab, right? And the person that hired her was like, okay, whatever, right? Aside from that, she fit the bill, right? So she starts working, the regional manager comes in and says, hey, we cannot have her working here, or she needs to take the hijab off. She said, nope, I'm not taking it off. She got a lawyer and she sued Abercrombie and Fitch. Abercrombie and Fitch said, no problem. They went to court and she lost. Okay? Now, she lost because Abercrombie and Fitch, in their job application, in their job description, it specifically says, we're looking for this. They gave her fair warning. They told her exactly what we're looking for, all right? And it's their prerogative as a business to say, look, we're looking for ABC, right? Come on, we're looking for ABC, and we're putting it out there. And if you don't meet ABC, can you make sure the door's closed? Thank you. If you don't fit that, then guess what? We don't have to hire you, okay? And it's not discriminatory in practice, it's just that they've outlined the criteria for the job. That's all it is. The manager that hired her made a mistake. Okay, that's all it is. The manager that hired her didn't outline to her like, hey, you cannot wear the hijab at work because it doesn't fit with the image that we are trying to portray as a company. Okay, not to say that they didn't like Muslims or anything like that. They were just going for a certain look, right? Every company, every apparel line has a different thing they're going for, right? And if it fits with that particular person, cool. Some of them don't care about who they hire. It's okay. But Abercrombie and Fitch is very particular about who they hire because they're trying to portray a certain image that aligns with their company objective, goals, and values and morals and that kind of thing. Okay. And so it's important that you keep that in mind, and understanding that there are ways in which companies can get around a lot of these things. Okay, and you'll see that, right? But back to disparate impact. So disparate impact is usually unintentional, but it has an impact on a larger group of folks, okay? But again, you're still liable for any actions or anything that occurs within disparate impact, okay? It doesn't matter whether you meant to do it or you didn't mean to do it, nothing to do with it, right? Judge, whoever will probably go lighter on you because again, it wasn't intentional, it wasn't done in a malicious way. It just happened, and so we have to kind of rectify that situation and make sure that whatever group that was affected, that they receive remedy. Okay, and so you hear me hear the, remedy and exposure and that kind of thing. These are all things you'll hear in, kind of lawyer talk and if you go to mediation, arbitration and that kind of thing, when you start really getting into the technical aspect of this whole process, you'll hear those words, right? But no company is looking for exposure, right? That's not what it's not a positive thing, okay? We want to make sure that we are in line with the rules, the regulations, and that everyone feels inclusive, right? And so we have a big push in our society now to make everyone feel inclusive, right? To embrace diversity, right? It's kind of got pulled back a little bit, but part of that, whole HR realm is diversity, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, initiatives and policies, okay? Anybody got any questions or anything? No? No?
Do you see a difference in like today's society with like the cancel culture, it being like affected with HR and more cases? Or is it just more education is available to employees?
Yeah, I think more education available to employees. I think as the workforce demographic changes, so does the mindset. Right? And so on social media, I need something from that person, right? So it probably doesn't work well in a corporate setting, right? So the more education employees have, the better it is, right? And more diversity that we have within the workplace, usually it tends to be a positive situation. I'm not saying every diversity initiative is necessary or, positive, but for the most part, diversity, equity, and inclusion is pretty positive in itself, right? Making sure everybody's good to go, right? Anything else? Okay, so next concept is business necessity, excuse me. Practice necessary for safe and efficient organizational operations, all right? So within the realm of companies having defenses as to how they can discriminate against you, this is the low-hanging fruit, sort of, right? This is the weakest, easiest one they can say. It's a business necessity, all right? So if anybody here has filled out an application, and at the bottom or within the application, it says, must be able to lift 40 pounds, right? That used to be a big disqualifier for a lot of women. Companies would use that to disqualify women or people they just felt like, oh, and we're, not as strong, older people, that kind of thing, right?
My job, we had one individual, we worked in biopharmaceutical labs. One of the requirements was you had to get into scrubs and change clothes to get in clean clothes and be in the labs. One of the guys, he said that he would be able to, and when he got the job description for.
So when you have a business necessity like that, if you can amend or customize or tailor the particular necessity, that is the most optimal situation, okay? Now, with that said, you can also have reasonable accommodation, but not honor that reasonable accommodation, right? Let's just say, for instance, have someone in a wheelchair, okay? And I hire them. And they are, their office is on the second floor. And all I have is stairs and that's it. And they come to me and say, hey, yeah, you don't have an elevator. How am I supposed to get to the second floor? Well, you probably have to take the stairs like everyone else while I'm in a wheelchair. So that's not gonna happen. Like, okay, well, we hired you, so you gotta make a decision here. All right? you need to either find a way to get upstairs, right? Or quit. Okay, now the company could say also, we'll move your office downstairs, right? We'll accommodate you, okay? The candidate or the new employee could also say, look, build me an elevator. Okay? Now, in certain instances, that will happen. They will build them an elevator, right? But it depends on what we call undue hardship. If it costs the company too much money to accommodate this particular person, they don't have to do it, right? And so that's very relative to the size of the company. If I go to Microsoft and they don't have elevators, which is not gonna happen, right? But let's just say they don't have elevators, right? And Microsoft is a billion-dollar company, and they hire an employee who's in a wheelchair and says, hey, I need you to build an elevator. Microsoft probably is gonna have to build an elevator, because they can afford it, right? And it's not gonna have a huge impact on their business operations. The bottom line, Bill Gates is still gonna get his $37 million a year. Nothing's gonna get affected, whatever it is, right? But in some companies, you can't do that, right? Let's say, for instance, here, if we didn't have an elevator, right? And we were like, hey, students, come up to the second floor, all right? And they were like, well, I can't, I'm in a wheelchair. Well, build me an elevator. The school will go, sorry, disenroll you and send you packing in some other school, okay? Because they couldn't afford it. Elevators cost $150, give or take, right, to put in, all right? And so the school would not afford, because that's an undue hardship for the company, right? They don't have to do that if it's gonna be an expense that's gonna have a detrimental impact on the bottom line, all right? So business necessities, the lowest hanging fruit there, right? The next one is the BFOQ, bona fide occupational qualification, right? And this is more of a specific reason, right, why we can't hire you. And it's very much more specific to the person in the situation, all right? So as an example, we had a case here, probably going on 15 years, all right? And it was the strip club somewhere in Miramar, all right? And so the young lady walks in, she puts an application for a job to be a dancer, okay? And one of the questions on the application is says, are you pregnant? And she puts yes, because she's pregnant. Okay, and so the company, the gentleman's club says, no, sorry, can't hire you. She's like, well, I feel discriminated. She gets a lawyer and they go to court and she loses. Okay, now why did she lose?
Bona fide occupation qualification, like she was pregnant and trying to work at a gentleman's club, and what gentleman want to be at a gentleman's club with?
But she wasn't showing.
But in so if she was to start working, they would have been responsible for her bills when she was out.
I feel she lost because part of the questions that they're asking was to be able to assess if you are a right candidate for the job they're looking for. So
Okay.
most likely there wasn't a definition to if you are pregnant, then you are a good candidate to be employed. So that was a questionnaire for them to be able to determine if she was a good employee or not, what they were looking for.
It's kind of the same as
kinda low.
Abercrombie and Fitch thing.
Yeah, so
That's
somewhat,
kind of like
yeah.
what I was kind of.
Yeah, no, you were close. Both you guys were close. Huh?
Occupational hazard.
As far as what?
She's pregnant. If
Okay.
anything happens to her, she can sue, or if anything happens to the, no?
No, I mean, she'd be like everyone else. She'd get workman's comp if she were.
Yeah, but I never heard of a suit like maternity leave.
No, they have that.
No, because they're
Yeah.
private contractors, because
Yeah.
the one that broke her face a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, they have maternity leave. They have it. Yeah, it's no different than any organization. Right? If she's dancing and then 1 month she comes in like, hey, I'm pregnant. They go, okay, cool. You're gonna take the next 3 months off or whatever you feel like you're ready to take off. When it comes, not realistic for you to dance, right? Then you take off, you get maternity leave, but you come back, your job's still there, right? So they have that, right? It just depends on the size of the organization. If it's 15 or more, then they definitely have it. If it's less than 15, they may not have it. It may be something different, right? But they have something, right? The point that, you know, the lawyers made for the strip club or the gentleman's club is that one of the things that, or the major thing about being at a gentleman's club is sex appeal, right? And I think you had mentioned it, somebody mentioned it. No one wants to see a pregnant woman dancing, okay? Honestly, like, I don't, this is just from the case, right? Right? And just from in the general consensus, most guys, most people that go to the strip club are not looking to see a woman who's pregnant dancing on the pole, right? I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but that's not what most gentlemen's clubs are about, right?
It's bad for business.
Right. So because of that, because she didn't meet the occupational qualification, right? Because eventually she would show. And so because of that, they could discriminate against her and say, look, we don't have to hire you. Okay, because you're eventually gonna start showing. All right. And so for all the other things that go with that, right? You said, you know, safety, occupational hazard, you know, healthcare, whatever the case may be, right? Having to find somebody new to come on board, that kind of thing, right? So they may have some issues with that. Yes, sir. Okay, I thought you were that.
It was developing and then it went away, but.
That's okay. You come back. But the FOQs are very specific to the person and the job and are used by companies to discriminate against people because there may be a specific qualification that you need in order to do the job, okay? Abercrombie and Fitch was kind of sort of like that, you know, but it was a little different just because of the religious aspect of it. The strip club one is more reminiscent of, you know, hey, you need to have sex appeal, right? That's at the core of our business, that's important for our business, right? And that applies across the board, whatever it is, right? It's almost to the point where if I was an instructor, and I was afraid of public speaking, and I wanted to do everything, I don't know, just not in a live lecture, they'd be like, well, we can't hire you, and you need to stand in front of the class and talk, right? And be comfortable with that. Well, you gotta fire, let you go, okay? So BFOQ is an important aspect of how companies get around, have a lawful way of saying, look, we don't need to hire you, okay? All right, so if you feel that you've been discriminated against, right, you have to prove, or you carry the burden of proof, okay? The plaintiff carries the burden of proof. Unlike in civilian court, where the defendant normally have the burden of proof, or the prosecutor or whoever have the burden of proof, right? So if you go to your job and you say, look, I've been discriminated against, I'm dropping a grievance, filing a grievance, excuse me, and it goes to court and that kind of thing, it's up to your lawyer to prove that whatever happened, whatever you say happened, actually happened. Okay, whereas different in civilian court or regular legal system where the prosecutors have to prove themselves or prove that they didn't do what they're being accused of. All right. So you got to think about it in the context of if you decide to go through with a claim or grievance against the company and it goes to court, right? How long are you willing to go on with it before you say, you know what, I'm good? All right. And this is kind of like the long game of companies, right? Because they know you don't have the resources to really play that long game, all right?
Yeah, I'm kind of going through that right now. I'm going through a work comp thing. And so like, one of the things that you have to do is you meet up with the lawyer and you have a disposition, which the first one took 6 hours. So then they have to like rewrite everything out, send it to you and correct it. So now they're like stalling all my appointments somewhere to try to wake me out.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. It's a normal practice in the legal realm, right? Matter of fact, you see it going on right now, even with the president or former president, all right? Coming up with stuff, technicalities, a lot of nonsense to keep it going. Has a different objective in mind, but for companies, their aim is to stretch it out as long as they can because they know they have more resources than you. At some point, you're going to buckle, right? Because you can't afford the $50,000 lawyer, right? You can't afford the time. Right? You can't afford the stress. They can. They have a team of lawyers, and the CEO probably is like, yeah, I heard about it, but I got other things to do. Right? And the CEO is not really worried about that stuff. Okay. And so you gotta be really, you gotta think about, okay, how am I going to handle this? Now, most cases, as far as HR goes, don't go to court. Right? They end up in, what we call mediation, right? Mediation, arbitration, that kind of thing, okay? And so, and most companies don't want to go to court. Right? Why would they not want to go to court?
Public image.
Public image, right? They got a reputation to uphold. And every time I turn around getting sued, that's taking a hit to my image. And that's kind of saying, oh, you know what, this company might not be that great to work for. They're always getting sued. What kind of culture are they, really, creating in that particular building, right? And so companies don't want to go to court. And you'll find that most, if not all, job applications, the fine print, if you read all the way to the end, it said, if you have any disputes, conflict, grievances, you are not allowed to file a lawsuit. You must first submit yourself to mediation arbitration, one of the remedial measures to settle this. If we so happen to get into arbitration mediation and we cannot, resolve the issue, then at that point, you can go ahead and drop a lawsuit. But it usually never gets to that, right? The companies or the company and the lawyer for the person normally come together. They reach some consensus as far as a number, usually. And then everybody goes on their way, they cut a check, and that's that, okay? So, difference between mediation and arbitration, right? Mediation is non-binding, arbitration is binding. Okay, so what that means is that whatever happens in mediation, I, as the plaintiff or the person saying, look, I feel like I've been discriminated against or something's been done to me. If the judge or whoever is, holding the mediation says, okay, this is what I rule, I go, yeah, I don't like that. I'm not taking that. So we're either gonna go back to mediation, or I'm gonna file a lawsuit. Arbitration, on the other hand, whatever happens in arbitration, the judge says, hey, this is it. That's it. Case closed. No appeals, no anything. It is what it is. Okay? The judge says you get 25 million, you get 25 million. Judge says you get $25, you get $25. Okay? There's no negotiating and not liking the outcome and all this other stuff. Doesn't work that way. Okay? So, really, when it comes down to it, the company has really all the leverage at the end of the day, right? The organization has all the leverage to make sure that they, one, don't end up in a place where they're getting their image tarnished. Two, they don't end up getting beat over the head with a crazy lawsuit, right? And you can thank McDonald's for some of this, okay? And that wasn't necessarily a work case, but
There was a hot water.
it was the hot coffee thing, okay? Or Chips Ahoy cookies, right?
Red Bull.
Red Bull, what happened to Red Bull?
Someone sued because they didn't get wings.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Actually, they just did it again
Yeah.
too. Someone else just re-upped
Yeah,
them.
this is real, yeah.
The Pepsi one,
Yep, then get his plane,
you think it's
Yeah.
fighter jet?
he didn't get his jet, yep. So there's a lot of frivolous cases out there, right? There's a lot of things, they're not frivolous, let me take that back. There's a lot of cases out there where companies make promises, thinking that it's not gonna happen, and then boom, it happens. And then they have to pay out, and then they're like, oh my goodness, we didn't plan for anyone to pay out, right? We didn't plan on somebody winning this thing and then wanting a jet, right? That's crazy. Or in the case of Chips Ahoy, right? Anybody familiar with Chips Ahoy cookies?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, well, for those that aren't, the Chips Ahoy are like bad chocolate chip cookies. That's all I can say. They're very old, been around forever in a day. Come in a blue bag, I think, still. Yeah, still.
Yes.
Chips Ahoy? Okay, I don't know. Unless that stuff, but either way, and this is more kind of with my statistics class that I use it, right? Chips Ahoy, right, at one point, when you got your cookie, you can get a cookie out of the bag and it have 3 chips. You get another cookie that have 18 chips. Okay, or for instance, your potato chip bags. Everybody buy a bag of potato chips, and you're like, oh, this bag is it's nice and big, right? And then half of it is air, and you open it, everything falls to the bottom. You got a quarter bag of chips, and the rest is just nothing, right? Okay, so they've been sued about that, okay? Because people go, look, I paid for a bag of chips. I got 75% air, 25% chips, right? It's not fair, okay? But again, people lose that stuff, right? And so what you'll see is little notes or little warnings on packages, right? Cigarettes, warning, not for pregnant women. Alcohol, not for pregnant women, right? You see these warnings on these packages, or they'll say, volume is this, but actual content may vary, right? They all originate from lawsuits and haven't been sued, right, by individuals, okay? Kind of the same thing here in corporate America when it comes to HR, okay? The company is promoting or saying something or promising one thing, but not delivering on what it is that they, said they were gonna do, right? And so it's up to the employee to say, look, I don't feel like you've been treating me fairly, and I'm gonna file a grievance, right? And the best thing really for everyone to do is to come to the table, and usually those problems can be solved really before all that even happens. If just a manager or your boss just comes to you and say, let's sit down, let's figure this out, you can, like, all the other stuff tends to go away because people just want to be heard. They just want to be acknowledged. They want you to make sure the situation goes away in the sense that, look, I don't like this person that's working next to me. And so, is there some way that I can move desk or not have to deal with them, right? Okay, we have to look at the circumstances, right? Is it a reasonable request, right? If it's unreasonable, then no, we can't do it. But if it's a reasonable request, and even if it's not a reasonable request, if it's something I can accommodate to keep the peace, then you should do that, okay? Because workplace scenarios can get very, very immature and very, very stupid real quick. All right. I had an issue when I was working at we'll just leave the company alone. An issue at a company that I worked at, and there were two co-workers. They started as friends and used to just pull practical pranks on each other. Right. One guy went too far, and then the other guy ended up punching him in the face. They ended up getting into a fight. And then it's like, okay, well, we need to separate them and put them, in different sections or whatever, or just separate them, wherever the case may be, right? But that's as far as it went, right? Even though the offense was really, it was terrible, right? It was very bad, and it turned out to be a bigger issue because it was almost like a biohazard situation. Okay, and so just be ready for those things, right? People will do crazy things at work, right? With you as an HR person, even as the leader, right, or the boss, you have to deal with, right? Because don't forget, you are that person's HR, right? You're the first line of defense. They're gonna come to you and say, hey, boss, unless they're the ones that are offending you, right? And even still, what you wanna do is let them know, like, hey, I don't appreciate the way you're treating me. I'm going to go to HR and file a grievance because I don't feel like I can talk to you, or you're discriminating against me, whatever the case may be, right? You promoted everyone else, but won't promote me, even though I'm doing majority of the work, yada, yada, whatever the case may be, right? But most of these issues can be solved by your direct supervisor, right? And they really are your HR, right? Once it gets past that, it's kind of out of their hands, and it goes to HR, and once it goes to HR, it's really, out of their hands too, because then they are mandated to do an investigation for the most part, and then the EEOC kicks in, right? The Employment Opportunity Commission, right? And they have a specific timeline about how to do things, when to do things, when things are due, and then what happens at the end, right? And for the EEOC, there's no monetary compensation, okay? EEOC does, they make you whole. So for instance, if you file a grievance saying that you feel like you got passed with promotion because of, one of the protected classes, and they find that you are correct, and they judge in your favor, then what happens is you get that promotion and any back pay that's associated with that, but you don't get any other compensation aside from that, right? Unless you go to a civil court, and at that point you can file for compensation, and sue the company, but usually at that point, everything's done, you get the promotion. But the problem with that is that most people don't like staying in that organization, right? They want to leave because they have a bad taste in their mouth. They probably had gotten isolated, right? People that used to be their friends are no longer their friends because now it's like it's a hazard to be your friend. You know, if the boss sees me talking to you, then they think I'm on your side. I'm not on anyone's side, right? And so there's a lot of other, second and third order effects that these kind of things have on the company because it really damages relationships, right? Lose trust in the company, lose trust in your leadership, lose trust in people, right? People that you work with. And so now we can't collaborate. We can't really move forward with what we have going on, right? So you gotta really pay attention to that. All right, retaliation. Don't do it, okay? Don't retaliate, all right? Everybody understand retaliation and what that looks like? Okay, if you come to me and say, hey, Dr. Case, I don't like the way you talk to me in class. I don't appreciate it. I'm gonna go, file a grievance against you. Cool, all right? And the next thing you know, I give you 2 Fs on a row on your LEs and you did impeccable work. And I'm like, no, this work sucks. Okay, give you 2 Fs. And you're like, wait a minute, I did everything you asked me to do. And this looks just like this other student's work, right? Nah, I don't think so. Give it F, right? That's me retaliating against you, right? That's illegal. I'm gonna get in trouble for that, right? You don't want to retaliate because you just dig yourself in a deeper hole if you start to do that. And a lot of companies do that, right? They take that person and they move them into a corner and then they start to give them like the crappy jobs, the crappy things to do. I'll take out the trash. Oh, we need someone to clean the bathroom, right?
Go fetch coffee.
Yeah, go fetch coffee, right? I don't think so. I'm a heart surgeon. I don't get coffee. Okay, that's myself, right? Nothing wrong with taking the trash out, right? But that's not gonna be my job, right? So I'm retaliating against you, right? You as a student, you come to me and I start retaliating against you. It's gonna have an impact on your GPA, right? Which in some people, that's gonna have an impact on their status as far as being here in the States, right? So it's a big deal. So retaliation, not looked upon favorably. If the judge or whoever is doing the mediation arbitration notices retaliation, you probably much should just call it a day. That company's lost already, okay? And have something called, incidental, what is that term? Either way. So let's just say, for instance, you work for a company and you have a company car. Okay? And you take that company car, you decide Friday night, taking all my people, we're going to the club, right? In the company car, we're gonna kick it, we're gonna hang out. And then you get behind the wheel when you shouldn't be getting behind the wheel, and you hit something, you damage something, right? And then the police arrest you, like, hey man, you DWI, DUI, whatever the case may be, right? Or the person that you hit, whatever the case may be, right? Who's getting sued here?
The corporation,
The corporation. Okay, why?
because it was a company vehicle.
It's a company vehicle. What
and
else?
Property.
Why else? Why else? Why would I sue the company and not the person? I'm suing the person too, but why am I gonna sue the company? Aside from the fact that it was a company,
Is they have deeper pockets and better resources.
they have better resources, right? Why am I gonna sue you? You're worth $25. When I can sue the company's worth $250 million, right? You're not on company time, which is where it gets kind of gray, right? Because now the judge, whoever is presiding over the case, has to decide, you know what? Common sense would dictate that you not use company things in the way they're not intended to be, or after hours, or whatever the case may be. But unfortunately, for the most part, you're an employee 24/7, right? And so depending on how it's set up and some other things, that company may not be liable for that particular instance or that particular situation, okay? But more likely, they will be, okay? And so the actions of your employees are important, okay? Because they can come back and they can cause you damage, all right? You see many lawsuits where you have CEOs or people within organizations that are getting sued for sexual harassment. Let's just do Harvey Weinstein, for instance. Everybody familiar with Harvey Weinstein? No? Film producer, director, whatever, in order to, take advantage of his position, right? He used to ask for sexual favors from women. Some of these actresses that we all know and love, right? The way they got their role is through doing favors for him. Whatever the case may be, right? Illegal, right? Illegal. But his company, right? Although he's the one that did it, his company got sued, right? And so when it boiled down to it, although he was a majority owner, when it came down to it, he's in jail, but I think he's going back now because they found some technicalities and they're gonna retry him. But the company ended up having been sold, right? And to pay off all the plaintiffs, okay? Although his brother, who's half owner of the company, had nothing to do with any of this stuff, right? The people that worked in the company had nothing to do with this stuff, the production team, the director, nothing. They had nothing to do with this, right? But the company got sold, and guess what? They basically lost their jobs, right? And so you gotta be careful about the actions of your employees and always emphasize, like, look, you're always on the clock. Just as much as, I'm sure, who has a work computer? Anybody have a work computer or work phone? Nobody? Ever had one before?
I have.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So work phone, work computer, right? That is not your property. That belongs to the company. At any point, the company decides they want to open it up, check it out, which they can remotely, right? They do so, okay? And so we had a problem, probably like 15, 20 years ago, where a lot of people would get their computers and, mostly male, they'd be serving porn on the work computer. Okay, guess what? Can't serve porn on the work computer, all right? And then some of these guys were doing some really bad stuff, the kind of porn they were watching, right? And so the company also got sued because you're using the organizational assets to do whatever it is you're doing, right? Now, most judges, common sense wise, will go, all right, company, we're not gonna mess with you. We know you didn't do anything. This person decided to use the computer in a way that wasn't authorized, right? And so they kind of, dismiss that. But again, go back to the point of these assets that you get from your company are not yours. They monitor them all the time, okay? All day, your phone is all subject to search, your computer, right? All that stuff is their property and they can come get it, look at it anytime they feel like it's their prerogative. It doesn't matter, okay? So keep that in mind, all right? All right, let me see. Let's try this. All right. To prevent charge of retaliation, employers can create and disseminate entire anti-retaliation policy, train supervisors, review performance evaluation, conduct a thorough investigation, and take appropriate action. All right. So different ways in which we can mitigate retaliation, right? Really, it's about education, about saying, look, you may be upset that someone accused you of something, right? Whether or not you did it, I don't know, right? But don't retaliate, okay? That's the one thing. For the employees, for the workforce, is to emphasize the fact that, look, we don't tolerate that. We don't condone retaliation. We don't condone, a hostile work environment. We don't condone sexual harassment within the workplace, right? And let them know they have an outlet in which they can convey or levy their particular grievances or their issues, right? As long as they know that, usually that's okay, right? They have someplace to go, right? And it was the biggest thing about someplace to go to where I can talk to someone about the problems I'm having, right? If I don't have any place to go, then I'm pretty much gonna flex the Department of Labor, the EOC, pretty much, it's up to them. All right, so now let's get into the real important stuff, all right? Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII, all right? This is a piece of legislation that was, let's see how to put it, built upon the Civil Rights Act of 1863, okay? The Civil Rights Act of 1863 was the first act or piece of legislation that Congress put out to protect civilians, to protect people in the workplace, or protect, people in general, right? As a human being, you have certain rights, and that kind of thing, right? So, Civil Rights Act 1863, all right, had some issues, all right? What do you think was the major issue with the Civil Rights Act of 1863?
It didn't include everyone?
It didn't include everyone, right? Who did it include?
Black.
No, did not include black,
Oh, women too?
didn't include women. Okay, the Civil Rights Act of 1863 only included white males. Okay, because it was based on the time period of our society, right? What was going on in our nation at that point in 1863. White males were pretty much the dominating force, majority of pretty much across the board, and everyone else was considered a minority or second-class citizen. All right, and so those rights and those rules that they put into that act didn't apply to anyone else except for white males, all right? So you move forward, you have Industrial Revolution, all right? And you have more people coming in immigration wise, right? People coming in from Ellis Island, coming in from Europe, kind of making their way west and that kind of thing, gold rush and all that other stuff, right? And start to realize that, hey, we have a growing diversity of people coming into the United States, right? And we need to be able to somehow respect their traditions, right? Without rooting our own out. Okay? And so it took a little while, but in 1964, basically under Kennedy, right? He initiated CRA 1964. Okay?
I think that was Johnson.
Nope, I'm gonna get to that.
Wow.
All right. Kennedy initiated it, right? But who actually signed it and enacted it was Johnson, right? Because Mr. Kennedy was dead at that point. Okay, good pickup though, I like that, all right? Lyndon B. Johnson was the one that actually put the CRA 64 into legislation and actually got it approved, right? Although it was John F. Kennedy's baby, right?
It's his brainchild.
It was his brainchild, yep, but Lyndon B. Johnson was the one that actually put it forth in honor of JFK and also in honor of, not in honor, but trying to kind of bring the nation together, right? Understanding the dynamics of that particular time, race, challenges, right? Religious challenges, you're talking about, the era of hippies, sort of, right? Everybody was kind of doing their own thing, right? Sexual freedom. You're not too far away from, suffrage, right? You're probably like 40 years away from suffrage or, from women getting the right to vote, happened in the 20s, right? So you're not, if you think about those things, they're not really that far off. So in order to kind of unite the nation and to kind of, bring everybody together, Lyndon B. Johnson put Civil Rights Act of 1964 out there, signed it and approved it. Although they did not want him to do that, right? Most Republicans, most Democrats and Republicans did not want that to happen, okay? Because again, the sentiment was, hey, everyone else except for white folks are, the majority and we should be the ruling class and it's not, we're not gonna treat everybody the same way. Okay, it's not fair, all right? So, 1964, that's where we get the protected classes. And it started with 5 protected classes, okay? We have 7 or 8 now, but that came in 1993, right, with Bill Clinton, right? Specifically, 2 things. One, he came out with the burden of proof and also the ability for plaintiffs to have no limit on their judgment. Okay, before there used to be a cap. If you went to court and you sued the company, the company was only liable for maybe $1 million tops. Okay? Even though you may have had an injury or something happening that was more than $1 million, that's as far as it would go. 1993, Bill Clinton took the cap off, and guess what? Companies were getting sued left and right for hundreds of millions of dollars, getting bankrupt, like all kind of stuff, right? Because there's some situations that $1 million is not gonna cover, right? Sounds crazy, but it's not, okay? And then the other one, which was more of a landmark and more impactful, was the kind of don't ask, don't tell thing, okay? He added in the discrimination against sexual orientation, all right? Because prior to that, you know, most people didn't talk about their sexual orientation, right? But a lot of people got harassed, you know, you had to go be in certain communities in order to kind of be yourself and that kind of thing, right? So we put that in there so that they didn't get discriminated against in the workplace, all right? And really what CRA 64, and then we're gonna talk about affirmative action here shortly, all those things are kind of put in place to balance out the playing field, right? And to kind of right the ship for past historical mistakes that other people made, right? We can't blame each other for slavery, sort of, but the institution, right? We can't blame each other for some of the things that have happened, right? Whatever your great-great-grandfather did, I can't really put that on you, all right? But what I can do is try to fix it to make it more fair to everyone, right? We want to make sure that it's merit-based and not based on anything else, right? And so CRA 64 was a huge piece of legislation, went through a lot of turmoil, and people thought it was gonna die, basically, because after John F. Kennedy died, a lot of people were like, okay, this is not gonna go anywhere. And they were okay with that, right? Because at that point, I could, you know, give the job to my buddy, you know, because he was white, I'm white, come on in. Even though they weren't as qualified, right? Oh, you're a woman. My buddy John here, he's a guy. I know you got a degree and everything. He has a high school diploma, but I'm gonna give him the job anyway. Okay? Those kind of things, right? Still kind of happens nowadays, but it's illegal. All right, very much against the law, and not something that you want to do as a practice for any company. Okay, but we have CRA 64 and Title 7, and so that basically is the the rules that we use for labor, right? The workforce. Okay, and there's different titles or different sections within CRA 64, where we have Title 4, right? Everybody, or Title 10. Is that Title 9 or 10? Title 9?
That's for the. like,
Women,
Women's sport?
yeah, women's sports, yeah.
Title.
Yep, we have Title 9, you got Title 4, I can't remember, in Title 10. There's a couple different, titles within there that are all about protecting our rights, right? Not being discriminated against, against prejudice behavior, right? Make sure that your religion or the fact that you may wear a hijab or or any religious affiliation is not held against you, right? Because back in the day, right, we had basically they were either Catholic or Protestant, right? You may have some Baptists in there down south, but for the most part, people were either Catholic or Protestant. All right, and then that was kind of a divide in itself, right? Catholics and Protestants don't get along for whatever reason, I don't know why, right? They just don't see eye to eye. Now we have so many religions within our society, especially in the United States, that in the United States, this is one of the tenets that makes the United States great, is religious freedom, right? And so if we have religious freedom to practice any religion we want, that should also carry over into the workplace, right? And you'll find that most companies have a very liberal religious policy, right? When I worked at Toyota, we had a room for anyone that was Muslim or practicing Islam. They could go and they could pray, right? It was facing east and all that good stuff. And we had everybody usually brought their own mat, but we had mats there and that kind of thing, right? If someone was Jewish, Saturdays for them was their holy day, right? So try not to schedule them, right? But at the same time, you have to be considerate about everyone else, right? I can't give you every Saturday off, right? I give you as much as I can, but I have to worry about other people wanting Saturdays off too, right? Because they have their own family, have things they want to do on the weekend, because that's considered the weekend or time off when things are going on, right? So I can't give it to you every time, but I will do my best. And if you want to speak to someone about, hey, voluntarily switching out and you guys come to some agreement, I'm okay with that, okay? But CRA 64 definitely, Title VII is an important piece of legislation that really is the, at the end of the day, is at the core of everything we do in HR, okay? So, somebody comment? Yes,
I
ma'am.
want to make a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
It's, according to the Civil Rights Act, it's illegal for any organization to discriminate.
Mhm.
But, for example, I have seen when someone applies for certain jobs
Mhm.
in certain companies.
Yeah.
They ask about your gender, which is good. But also the race, and
Mhm.
ethnicity,
Mhm.
ethnicity.
Ethnicity,
Yes.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
But from my perspective, I don't know. I think this you segregate
Mhm.
to separate people depending on the race. But at the end of the day, we only have one race, which
Right.
is human beings. So I kind of disagree with that
Okay.
because, for example, if you don't want to discriminate anybody, why you are asking if you are Latino
Mhm.
or Asian or
Right.
whatever. But it's my comment.
No, that's a good comment, and also that is, I'm pretty sure that's illegal. Yeah, they can't ask you those questions. They can't ask you anything about your gender, they can't ask you about your marital status, they can't ask you about how many kids you have.
Because they say that according to the equal employment
Mhm.
opportunity, we would like to know.
Right, they put it in a frame of, we're trying to collect data.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like, it's not
Yeah.
gonna do towards your application, it's
Yeah.
just like, it's just like for them.
It's,
Like-
Okay.
it's trying to meet the diversity requirements, right?
Mhm.
So in order to, unless because they're gonna do it one way or the other.
Yes.
They can ask you right now,
Yes.
or they can wait and just take a poll or take a survey, whatever, but those questions tend to be illegal. You have to be real careful with those things. And most hiring managers are not they're gonna stay away from them because they're really, like, it's slippery. You gotta be real specific, but they used to be able to do it, no problem, but now it's not as much of a practice, and it's illegal for the most part, for them to ask those questions, alright, but good comment. Good comment. You wanna say something?
Oh, no, it was
Okay.
on that,
Okay.
because, yeah.
Yes, sir.
I was gonna say, like, maybe, most likely, I would guess they use it, the demographic,
Mhm.
information
Yeah.
for statistical
Yeah.
analysis,
Mhm.
to just find out what direction their company is going in accordance with the, demographic.
Yep.
But I also feel like even if they do have it, on the application, if you
Mhm.
wanna put it, there is an option to just not answer.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
there are
Yeah.
options, but it can also be used as a way of saying like, your corporation is already having issues with not having enough people of a different race. It's already like, mostly in most of the situations I've been in, it's only me. And so, I get in situations where I'm in weird situations where I'm having to explain stuff, so other organizations like, well, we'll bring somebody else in, so then they'll start looking at the resumes like that too.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things where it could be beneficial, but it could, so.
It all depends on how the company uses the information. The smart thing is not to ask those things during the hiring process. Now, during recruiting process, it's a little different, right? During recruiting process, we're not gonna ask anybody, but we may be looking for a certain thing. All right, because again, we're trying to fulfill some of these initiatives that are voluntary in nature, right? DEI is all voluntary, right? Affirmative action is voluntary. Companies don't have to do affirmative action. It's all voluntary, right? Until you get in trouble, and then we'll talk about that. But for the most part, companies will, during recruiting, they might be looking for something in particular because they're trying to fill a certain requirement, all right? And so maybe we have a lack of, women in the company, right? We have that now. We have a lack of women at the higher levels, right? CEO, COO, there's a very big lack of that in the United States, right? And so there's an initiative, a push to find talent that we can groom to bring up and then make them CEOs and CEOs. But you have to ask the tough questions sometimes, like, okay, where you from? Da, 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 all these other things, because if people get jealous, okay? People get envious when they see one group of folks getting all these advantages and another group of folks are not getting anything, right? And it's hard to focus on everyone at the same time, all right? So for instance, like Harvard. Harvard used to have this reputation, they still kind of do, right? If you were Asian, you're gonna get into Harvard. Okay, now this is not necessarily true, but this is what the reputation, this is the image they had. If you were Asian, you're gonna get into Harvard. It didn't matter. Okay, because we have these preconceived notions that all Asians are good at math. They're all scientists, they're all brainiacs, right? Which we know is not the case. Okay, but Harvard, they kind of had this kind of pattern of exhibiting that, of always hiring or not hiring, admitting Asians to the point where at one point they had a 5-year stretch where I think 85% of their admittance for the freshman class were Asian. Yeah, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, right? And then the other 15% were, 10% was Caucasian, and the other was, 1 or 2% were minorities. Okay? So they got sued for that, right? And so they revamped things, right? They changed things up, they changed their guidelines, right? And guess what happened? Last year,
They got sued again.
they got sued again. But by who?
Asians.
The Asians. They got sued by the Asians. Because the Asian folks were like, wait a minute. We're used to getting in at this high rate. Now you're not letting us in because you're letting all the minorities in. You're letting all the women in. You're letting all, all these other folks that aren't Asian in, right? Now we feel like we're getting discriminated against. Okay? So it's really it's not a winning battle, right? At the end of the day, it needs to be merit-based, especially at an academic institution, right? Especially the company or institution as prestigious as Harvard, Yale, all your Ivy Leagues, right? They need to be merit-based. They can't be based on, Asian. And the other thing is that, a lot of the Asian families that did apply, most of them were well off, and they were coming from their home country. They weren't born here, right? And so that has another implication to it, right?
I was also gonna say, they might have relied a little bit too much on, test scores.
Yep,
Typically,
absolutely.
those countries, Asian
Very
countries
good
rank
point.
higher on
Yep.
test scores just because it's the way of teaching.
Absolutely.
So that also could have thrown them
Mhm.
off in terms of just getting too many students
Yep.
admitted, just because their scores would be just too high to compete with the local pool.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point, right? Because the way school is so much more different in China and Korea and Japan than it is here in the States, right? Here in the States, we're kind of loosey-goosey with it. Like, yeah, you try your best, get an A, whatever, okay? You don't get an A, you get a B, all right? Sometimes you'll take the C, right? In Asia, it doesn't work that way. It's an A or die, right? For the most part, as far as I can tell, right? It's the same way in China, kind of same thing in Korea, right? The bar for excellence is extremely high. A lot of pressure and stress put on the students to excel, right? Well, we don't have that in the United States, right? Why do we go to school for well, I guess it's the same thing. They kind of go for the same thing, but at the end of the day, their bar is a little higher, right? And so you're right, when you compare that to American GPAs, right? When you have somebody that has a 3.0, right, and is involved in 80 other things, right? And you have somebody who has a 3.9 and also involved in other things, they just happen to be Asian, right? You're probably gonna take them, right? You're probably gonna take them at the end of the day, right? But it just became a more of a pattern, which was disturbing because now it just seems like, okay, you're just going after Asians because of the higher GPA, you're trying to maintain your image, right? And also there's a pot of money attached to it, right? Because you got big donors, right? You got these exchange programs where people, hey, I'll give you $10 million if you let my kid come to your school. No problem. We'll let you, hey, whatever, you know, did you have a question? Nathan? Okay.
USC last year.
USC last year with the actors and
USC,
actresses, right? And, you know, paying, you know, certain particular person who had some influence with the USC board and some of these other schools, right? And it's big business, right? He's not the only one that was doing, there was a lot of other people doing that, and it happens on a regular basis, you know. Sometimes it's about who you know that get you into the schools, right? If you are alumni at Harvard, guess what? Your kids get in. If they want to go in, they can get in. It's called the legacy admission. Okay, USC has one. Most of the big schools have the legacy admission. If your parents went to a particular school, they can, your kids will get in. Yes, sir.
It was similar at my school that I went to for
Mhm.
undergrad, so. when I
Pepperdine,
first
you
got
said?
there- Sorry,
What school you say?
Hobart, New Orleans.
Okay, yeah.
It's, upstate New York.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
So, when I first got in, a bunch of students were like, oh yeah, I'm legacy, and I would just be like, what does that mean?
Right.
And then I heard about it, and they were like, yeah, just because our parents went here and they donate millions here. we
Yep.
Really don't care. I knew this one guy, he was on the hockey team.
Mhm.
And he was like, he came in on the hockey team in his freshman year, so he was like an athlete.
Right.
And, we had the same class. I barely passed that class, and I went to all of the classes and sessions. I can tell you, he probably didn't even like care,
Right.
but I saw that man like graduate. Just
Right.
because like I knew, like it's just how it worked, you know,
Mhm.
the donations and everything, sometimes they're very lenient.
Definitely more lenient, and it's and the athlete aspect adds something else to it too, right? For those that aren't familiar with the college system and how sports, we're one of the few nations that put them together. Most countries, sports and schools are separate entities. Okay, you do sports after you're done with school, right? It's not part of the school system. Whereas here, universities, we have basketball teams, football teams, they all generate money. If you want to play a sport and you want to go to school, you can, but you got to do it after, or you become a professional. This is why in Europe, if you are going to be a professional, you decide you're not going to go to university, or this is what you're going to do for your life, they start early. 14, 15, they're pros, right? Because they don't put the two together. Make up your mind. You're going to school or you're going to be a professional athlete.
I was gonna say, right now, Spain is in the Euro final that's
Mhm.
going on right now, and they're like star players, 16 years old.
Yeah, they're 16, 17 years old, right? I'm more familiar with basketball and how that works. They're young because they don't put the two together. But athletes, you know, in particular, when it comes down to it, you know, they don't do anything anyway, right? And no disrespect to any athletes that went to college. I was an athlete in college. If I didn't want to go to class, I didn't have to go to class, and I wasn't that great. Okay. I was not going to NBA. I wasn't any of that. All right. Imagine the guys that are actually going to be professionals. All right. These guys were getting like cars, $50,000. You know, they were like, they didn't go to class. I had a one that was sitting next to me at two. I think I saw him one time. He was on a football team. I was on a basketball team. And I saw him one time, and then next thing I see somebody sitting in his seat, like taking notes for him. I'm like, who are you? I'm taking notes for Jermaine. Like, what? Taking notes for Jermaine? Can you take notes for me too? Like, you know, so it's different, but at the end of the day, you know, really, you have to keep track of that stuff, right? And this is where a lot of these other programs stem from. Affirmative action, right? Stems from this imbalance, right? Of, hey, this is what happened to us in the past. We're trying to fix it, right? But then you gotta have to find that right level that accommodates everyone. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we're all minorities. It's just very relative. Okay, it's very relative. So if you don't treat everybody equally based on their merits, you're gonna run into problems, right? Nepotism and all that other good stuff, right? Which we'll kind of get into. What time is it?
6:55.
6:55. All right, let's take a quick 5 minutes. Come on back and then we'll keep pushing on.
Like, appreciate it. All the way at the end. Way back, Michael. All right.
All right. So, as I mentioned before, the rules don't apply to everyone. Okay, so in order for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to apply to you, for you to be subject to it, one of the first criteria is you have to have 15 or more employees, okay? And so again, they just see that 15 number being an appropriate size of a company where you're probably not as familiar with some of the employees as you would be, you know, if it was a smaller organization, right? So 15 more employees, right? Applies to all schools, right? Public and private. All right, so again, within the classroom, within the company setting or the building, whatever the campus, right? All the rules apply against not being prejudiced, not, you know, sexual orientation, you know, getting discriminated against that, not discriminate against, you know, your creed and all that other stuff, right? And as it should be. Because school is really where, you know, we kind of come into this melting pot sort of, right? And have different ethnicities, have different backgrounds, different experiences. And that's where you really go to kind of get exposed to that and learn about that stuff, right? Learn as to why or how other people live and what's important to them. And you come from this part of the world, how is that, right? You garner experiences from other people. And that's the important part about school, right? Get exposed to certain things, right? And so we want to make sure that that's a the environment is, you know, conducive to learning, right? And you're not worried about whether or not you didn't get a particular thing or something, a scholarship or internship because you were a particular color or particular gender or particular religion. Well, it's not to say that doesn't happen, because we can see that clearly happens in light of, you know, this whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right? And then you see some of the schools where
EEO.
right, EEO and some of the presidents have come under fire, right? Remember I mentioned last week about the Harvard president, the first woman and minority to lead Harvard, and they all went up to Congress to testify about this whole Israeli-Palestine and the rights of students on campus, whether they could protest and that kind of thing, and they kind of fumbled a whole bunch of things, and you know, at the end of the day, she ended up leaving Harvard right after 6 months. University of Pennsylvania, right? Another school. She ended up leaving eventually, all right? And so, you know, school is one of those places where it's tough because it's a different dynamic than it was before, all right? School, academic institutions were always seen as a place where you could have peaceful protest, right? Where you could fight for the rights for the things that you believed in, right? Openly and kind of like have everybody kind of see it and understand it was out there in the open. Now you really can't do that anymore, right? Now you yourselves, right? You know, the African American culture, because there was a commonality, right? There was a bond, right? But again, we still mix with each other in different aspects, because when you go to class, you don't know who's in your class, right? You just kind of go to class and do your thing, but you may have a lot of other folks there that aren't necessarily, you know, from where you're from, right? They don't look like you, right? They don't think like you. But that's the benefit of school, okay? All right. State and local governments, of course, that makes sense, right? Public and private employment agencies, right? These with 15 or more members. 11 years is kind of a, if you want right now, because we're not as unionized as we used to be, right? Basically, after Jimmy Hoffa disappeared, but after that, things kind of went downhill for unions, and you know, most companies are not pro-union. Most companies are like, we don't want the union, don't mess with it, but you see, you know, as a couple of years, unions are trying to make a comeback, right? It depends on the state. You know, up in New York, we always had unions, right? The garbage men always had union, the police officers, firefighters, all those guys had unions, right? Teachers union, always had unions. Yes, sir.
Okay, so the company that I was working for, where the building where they were at, the building people were all in a union.
Mhm.
So the security, the cleaning staff, everybody.
Mhm.
And they were getting paid significantly better. They had their benefits,
Yep.
they were getting paid a lot better.
Mhm.
Whenever you see strikes, that's a union.
Yeah.
Like we used to organize those.
Yeah. No, did you finish your point?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to
Okay,
say, like, in terms of like, I just firsthand saw it, and like, it was better than my own conditions, and
Mhm.
I was kind of taken aback, I was like, oh, I went to school, did all this, and got this job and
Right.
everything, and here, it's not about, your, degree or your qualification or
Right.
whatever, it's more about like community. They
Right.
had a sense of community, so they could negotiate their terms better.
Mhm. So unions are more of, the archetype of, I guess, socialism, sort of.
Yeah, it's
Right.
kind of like a HRM, like last choice, like you get the employees together, they figure out what they want, and then they work as an entity with the thing, but then after that, you don't get any time to shine, so like you're, like, if you perform over, you're counted the same as everyone else, so it's like pros and cons.
Yeah. Yeah, when it comes down to unions, they're great for negotiating purposes, and you come in, as a unit. You're stronger, with bigger numbers, right? The problem with unions is that whatever the union leaders negotiate with the organizational leaders, it's locked in.
Mhm.
You can't go in individually and ask for something, right? Till the contract is up. And then at that point, right, you can go in to the union people and say, look, we'd like to see this, this, and this, right? And the union people go, oh, we talked to leadership, they're not gonna do it. Then we have to decide whether or not we're gonna strike. Right? And so unions, are a good thing, but most companies don't like to see the unions because it's more of a headache for them, right? To have to deal with a large group of folks who come unified with a certain objective, like kind of like divide and conquer, right? If I'm dealing with each of you individually, that's better for me as a company because I can lie to you all day, right? You got 50,000, you're doing the same job, I'm gonna give you 45,000, but you don't know that, right? Same thing, hey, I don't like you, I'm gonna give you 30,000, okay? Union can't do that, right? Something goes wrong, hey, that guy's supposed to be working 15 hours, he's a union worker, he needs his 15 hours. I don't care where you get it from, how it happens, but that's the way it is, all right? And so unions are subject to Title VII, just to make sure that they're doing the right thing, because unions, again, based on the past history or historical accounts, unions have been known to be easily influenced in a negative way, right? For the longest time, again, back to Jimmy Hoffa, the mob controlled the unions, right, to a certain degree. And they would just use that as their personal piggy bank. And even now, New York, there's still some mafia, presence in the unions, right? And who gets certain contracts and where the contracts go and, how much they get paid. There's still some of that going on, some of the racketeering stuff going on, right? And so unions are real, people are real skeptical with unions, companies are anyway, with unions. They're great for the worker, right? But, if you get favorable terms, that's the thing. If you get unfavorable terms, you have a bad negotiator, you get a bad deal, okay? Joint labor management committees for apprenticeship and training. Oops. Where my people go? Oh no, did they fall out? Internet fell out. Let's see. There you go, okay. They fell out. Where's my thing? Okay, no. All right. All right, Civil Rights Act 1991, okay? Let's see, business necessity, let me see if I talk about it. Intentional discrimination, yeah, I kind of talked about that already. Move on with that. All right, so let's talk about affirmative action here, all right? So, anybody, is everybody familiar with affirmative action?
No,
Huh?
no,
No. As far as a policy, what else? Now, I know that everybody that's not from the States probably is like, I don't know what, no idea what affirmative action is, which is understandable. All right, so affirmative action basically is the government's way or the nation's way of saying, look, again, we're trying to level the playing field for the things that were done to you in the past, all right? We know that you were restricted from buying a home, you know, as African American, you know, it's a process called redlining, all right? We know that you didn't get the job that you should have got because, again, you're a woman. You didn't get the opportunities you should have got because you were, you know, Protestant or something like that effect, right? So affirmative action was put in place to give companies and organizations and schools a plan or a guide in how to, you know, build up their population to be more diverse. Okay? And so when it comes down to affirmative action, the whole premise is that if the person is qualified, then the person should be given opportunity to be admitted or get the job or that kind of thing, right? A lot of people are under the misconception that affirmative action is just about, hey, you're a woman, so you get the job. You're black, you get the job. It doesn't work that way, right? You have to meet the qualifications. Once you meet the qualifications, at that point, then I can say, hey, what's our affirmative action plan look like? And what do our numbers look like, right? If we're trying to build a certain cohort or certain population demographic within our population, is this person going to add value to that, right? And so we can have an affirmative action plan, but again, it's not mandatory, right? When it is mandatory is when the organization or institution breaks the law. So if you're found that you've had some discriminatory practices, you've been prejudicial against certain people because of the, you know, one of the protected classes, the government comes in and says, okay, no problem, we find that you are not behaving properly. Put together a affirmative action plan and we're gonna mandate, we're gonna make it mandatory that you have sort of a quota system now. Okay, this is where the whole quota system comes from. And so, again, let's go back to Harvard. Harvard had to do this, in which they had an affirmative action plan put into place, and it became mandatory, put in place by the Department of Justice, and basically said, look, if a minority has a 3.0 and they meet all the other qualifications, you have to admit them. Okay, over somebody else. Right? Once you kind of reach that threshold where you have, you know, 20% of a particular group that you bought in, right? Let's just say, you know, they got 100 applications to get into, you know, freshman class, and they pick the first 20 or so, like, okay, good to go, all right? Kind of look at it and say, okay, what do we have here as far as like the variety of people within that group? And then after that, the next application comes up, it says, hey, it's someone from a disadvantaged community, but they have a 3.0, which is the basic, the minimum requirement to get into Harvard, right? They were on the debate team, chess team, whatever, they had community service, okay, bring them on in, right? Without actually having to battle with the 3.9, 4.0, with president of every club in the school, you know, intern at the Supreme Court, all this other stuff, right? And so affirmative action is there to make sure that, you know, things are done fairly, but that we right the wrongs, but also create a balanced playing field, right? And if you have affirmative action mandated to you, the Department of Justice puts somebody there within your organization to watch you for a year. Okay, so literally there's somebody there just to make sure that you are following the plan. Okay, they're physically there. It's a lawyer and just sitting there. They come to work every day. You have to give them an office. They come to work every day and just sit there, look at the policies, look at what's going on, check everything out, and then that's, they know they may do some other work, but their job is to make sure that the affirmative action plan is being instituted and implemented in the way that they feel like is correct, okay? And so it's a burden for the schools or for the organizations to do that if it's mandatory, but again, it only happens if they broke the law. If they didn't break the law, then affirmative action is voluntary and you don't have to do anything. Okay, you don't have to have an affirmative action plan. I don't have to let you in, you know, just because you meet the minimum requirements, right? But when you do that, it offers everyone an opportunity that is qualified that wouldn't have gotten a chance otherwise, right? If you go back 20, 30 years, right? If you had a minimum 3.0, but you were a woman and you applied to the, you know, the science department, you probably weren't gonna get in because you're a woman, right? If you had a 3.9 GPA, because you're a woman, they weren't gonna let you in, right? Nursing program, all day. Teaching program, all day. You wanna be a scientist, you wanna do something, you know, STEMmy, like, you know, mathematics and, no, you're not gonna let you in, okay? Affirmative action kind of fixed some of that, right? To say, look, they're qualified, you gotta let them in, right? So you'll hear a lot of negative things about affirmative action because a lot of people don't understand it and they think it's mandatory because they have been affected by it, right? Because I can't hire everyone, right? If I get to a certain point where I have a certain type of demographic, right, I have to start thinking about, okay, I need to hire other people that look different, right, that meet the minimum qualifications, right? And not to say that you won't have those that exceed or, you know, meet the highest levels, but you gotta give the people a chance that, you know, that have the 3.0, right? Because those people tend to be a little more well-rounded, funny enough, right? Because if somebody has a 3.0, somebody has 2.9, what do you really think about those two people? What's the contrasting difference between those two folks, you think? Somebody has a 3.0 and somebody has a 3.9.
Person that's 3.9 is very specific to that certain topic. The person that's 3.0 might be more diverse where they might know a little bit of this, but they know, like, they have the street smart. So
Yeah.
where,
Okay,
I always say 3.9, I mean, they in the books all the time, they don't have no
Okay.
life.
yeah, yeah. So you guys are saying the same thing, right? The 3.9 person is probably more, you know, myopic. They kind of like, their lane is very short, right? Very kind of closed in. The apertures are like this. Whereas 3.0, typically you'll see that that person is, you know, an academic, but they're also a musician. They're also an artist. They also like to do different things. They have a social life, right? They bring more to the table as far as, you know, having value to the school, right? That's not to say that people with 3.9s don't also there, because you just have people that are just intelligent and they can do a bunch of stuff really well, and they do that, but it tends to really be, you know, when you have those folks that are really focused on school and have high GPAs, that used to be kind of that, just their emphasis. They just focused on school all the time, right? Whereas somebody else that comes in and is more well-rounded, has other things going on, has experiences in different areas that you can bring in, and they kind of spread the wealth, right? Educate others on things that they're not familiar with. That's right.
I was gonna say, for like the difference for me between 3.9, probably I spent more time doing other stuff. I'm sorry, 3.9 probably spent more time might be the better choice.
Mhm.
But if it's same place, but you need a receptionist or you need somebody to talk to people, to get funding, stuff like that, you might go for a 3.0 cause
Right.
that, like you said, is more all-rounded.
Mhm. And that's a good point you make up about the funding and the money that comes with affirmative action and having a more diverse population, right? There's more money attached to it when you more federal funds when you have a more diverse group, right? Because we want to promote that, right? As a society, as the United States of America, we're known as the melting pot of the world, right? If you go to other countries, they're very homogeneous, right? If you go to Japan, pretty much everybody's Japanese, right? You go to China, everybody's Chinese, right? You come here, it's some of everything, okay? You don't know where anybody's from. You can try to guess, right? But I'm Caribbean, but I have a cousin who's in Dominican Republic, and he considers himself Spanish. And he speaks Spanish. I speak French, all right? So, but we're cousins, right? But he's probably a little bit lighter than me, right? But people see him, they think he's black, and he doesn't consider himself black. He's himself Spanish, right? Which is fine, because he is. He's part Spanish, right? But at the end of the day, we want to create an environment to where we have everyone feels included, right? And everyone feels that they are getting a fair shake and not necessarily getting screwed over because of whatever the case may be, whatever thing is people get hung up on, which we get hung up on a lot of stuff. Okay. I want to make sure I hit certain things. Okay, let me get some of this stuff, all right. Nope. Okay, so I skipped over a few things, but you can read those on your own, right? I'm gonna kind of get to some of the acts, right? So one of the first acts that we're gonna talk about here is the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, right? PDA. And this was put in place, I think early 60s, right? Because what was happening was that women were getting disqualified for jobs because they were pregnant, or the notion that you may want to get pregnant. It was enough for people to go, no, we're not gonna hire you, right? And this was a big problem and basically all the way up to, I would say, the early 90s, right? When we walk in, and the first thing that, hiring managers, if they were male, they'd be like, all right, she's a woman, how old is she? And they would ask those questions. You got any kids? Are you married? Right? Those are all probing questions. They want to know, because if you don't have kids and you're not married, that means that you may want to get married and you may want to have kids. Right? And when do you plan on doing that? While you work here? No, not gonna happen. Indeed. Because we don't want to pay for your pregnancy. We don't want to pay for your time off. We're not gonna hold your job for you, right? Because that's another job that we can be given to a good male, right? Good, guy. And so it was pretty bad, right? And so they came out with this act to protect women and say, look, you can't do that, right? Just because the woman may or may not, think about having a child, or they may have gotten pregnant, like they need to be protected under the law, right? And you shouldn't, discriminate against them or be prejudicial against them, and because they have a kids or they're gonna, they want to get pregnant. Okay. All right. Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, right? Anybody here ever use FMLA? No? Okay. FMLA basically is a program that companies have, or we have it, that gives people time off for certain things, right? Now, it used to be focused mostly on women and, pregnancy and child rearing and that kind of thing. And then they just put in, probably like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, they put in a paternal aspect into it, so that now if you are a father, all right, you could take up to 8 weeks, I think it is, to be with your wife to help take care of her after she had birth, right? After she gives birth, excuse me. Right? And so women get 12 weeks, and that could be extended up to 18 weeks, right? And it can be unpaid or paid. Right? It all depends on whether or not you have it on the books, right? If you don't have it on the books, you can also get it gifted to you. So let's just say you have some someone, it's male or female, right? You don't have any more, and you are still sick or don't feel good, whatever the case may be, you you're married to someone in active duty and they are going or coming back from deployment, you could use FMLA to take time off to spend with them. Grandparents, up to grandparents, you could take time off to, be with them if they're not feeling well, right? They're not doing good. So anything that has to do with really taking care of your family and needing time off, you can use FMLA for the most part, right? You just gotta put it in. It's better to put it in as quickly as possible than vice waiting, right? And every company has different ways of handling it, all right? Because there are some tax and some payroll implications with it, right? Especially if you have no time, right? If you have no leave or no, accumulated time off, then you're probably gonna get it unpaid, which is not good for you, right? But if you have time off and you can take it, then it's gonna be paid, right? So it's different components, different things that going on. If you're a reservist, you have to do active duty time, 4 to 6 months, whatever the case may be, you can use FMLA also. And they also have to hold your spot, hold your job for you. If you're in the military and you get activated and you have to go off and do something, right? The company by law has to hold the job for you, hold a job. Doesn't have to be the same exact job, right? As long as it's at the same pay rate, that's all that matters. It could be less responsibility, it could be more responsibility, but it needs to be the same pay rate, but they need to have a job for you, and they can't just let you go, all right? So, important aspect. Let me see here. Oops. All right, Equal Pay Act, again, we're gonna pay, fair wages for fair work, right? So if you and I are doing the same job, right, we should get paid the same, right? My gender should not be a criteria or determining factor as to whether or not you get paid more or you get paid less, right? One of the things that is, very prevalent within the workplace is most people here in the United States, people don't talk about how much they get paid, right? If I ask you, what's your salary, right? Like, hey, why are you asking me that? Right?
It's not illegal.
Yeah, it's not illegal, okay? You can ask whoever you want about how much money they make, okay? Private companies, it's a little bit harder to get because they're private. Publicly traded companies, you can look that up in their 10K, 8K reports. You can see exactly how much the CEO makes. You can see how much everybody basically makes within that pay band, right? You can't see individual, except for the C-suite. You can see individually the CEO, COO, CFO, you can see how much they make individually, right? But everyone else, you gotta get an idea, a band. Okay, you get paid between here and here, right? So it's not illegal. So a lot of people, think that it's illegal that you can't do it, but you can, right? But companies want you to think that you can't ask, right? Because they need to leverage that when they hire you or hire other people, right? I don't necessarily always want you to know that I'm paying you less than somebody that I hired at the same time, right? Because it may cause some friction between that you two, and each one of us have different things they bring to the table, right? And so that's why it's been really hard to really, kind of quash that particular, mindset. Because you don't know everything I'm coming to the table with, right? You don't know if I have all these certifications or this other stuff I've done, or if I'm doing special projects. You don't know any of that, right? And so most people don't necessarily have all the information, and so it's difficult to really say, hey, how much are you getting paid? And then go to your boss, say, hey, look, Jim's getting paid $10,000 more than I did, and we got hired the same day. Why is he making more money than me? Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm gay? Is it because I'm, Catholic? What is it? Right? And so that may not be the case. It just may be the case of, hey, Jim has more qualifications than you. Jim, been in the game for 20 years. You've been in the game 2 years. Okay, more experience, right? And then we use Jim in different things that we don't use you in because you don't have the experience, right? And so you don't want to have to explain that all the time. Right? But at the same time, we want to make sure that people get paid equally for fair work, equal pay, okay, and not based on anything else. So we have the Equal Pay Act that came out to make sure that people didn't get screwed over as far as pay goes, and that nothing else came into the decision-making process as far as like religious affiliation, gender, all that good stuff, right? All the protected classes of within our Title VII. Okay, we'll make sure that everybody get in fair shape here and can get as much money as they can. Okay. All right. Equity kind of the same thing. Okay. Glass ceiling, glass elevators. Okay. So glass ceiling is a concept of that, hey, you're only gonna get to a certain point in your career because there aren't any opportunities for you based on your gender. It's normally a gender thing, right? When we say glass ceiling, we normally associate that with women. And that, you get to a point where you kind of hit the ceiling and you can't break through, right? When I was talking about, the lack of CEOs, female CEOs, that's because we had a glass ceiling for the longest time, right? In most companies in the last 30 or 40 years, as a woman, you could be executive something, right? You get to this level, but that was it. You could never be CEO. You could never be COO. You would never be anything C. All right, you'd always be down here. All right. Meanwhile, you watch the people that sometimes, in some cases, came after you get elevated above you, right? But you couldn't because you're a woman, right? That's kind of the glass ceiling. The glass elevator is more about specific fields, right? So when I was talking about science fields, right, for a long time, women, think about it this way. When you used to go to the hospital, I'm sure it's probably still the same way, but you see a woman, people automatically assume she's the nurse. When in fact, she's the doctor and he's the nurse. Okay? Because they had this glass elevator in the medical field where they did not like women to be doctors, right? There's something about science, scientists and rocket scientists and all this other stuff. They something about women weren't allowed, right? And it goes back, to back in the day, medieval times, and just the role of women and how they were supposed to comport themselves, right? And what women were thought of, and that, back in the day, the notion was that most women were not smart. Right? Women were intelligent, they were too emotional, right? They weren't good at decision making and that kind of thing, right? Men, on the other hand, were pragmatic, were very stable, we made great decisions. Okay, so those are all characteristics we want to have in scientists and doctors and all that stuff. I don't want an emotional doctor, right? I don't want an emotional president, right? Which had led us to being one of I think the only developed nation that's never had a female president. Right? All the other countries that had a female president for the most part, even the most, restrictive places for the most part have had a female president. Gee, Mexico just got one, well, a couple weeks ago, right?
Mhm.
So we're way behind, right? It's probably gonna be a while, right? Because if you have a black president, that's how deep it is. Right? You'd rather a male who's black to be president than to let a female and woman be president. Okay? It's gonna come one way or the other, right? Maybe sooner than later, President Biden wins again and he doesn't make it. Because then it'd be President Kamala Harris. She's next up. Yes, ma'am.
I want to share
Yes,
experience
yes.
I had, and it's the opposite way. I met a woman that she's very feminist,
Mhm.
and she was only hiring women.
Mm.
And she said like, oh, because we were discriminated in the past,
Mhm.
now I'm going to
Then fix
hire
it.
just
Yeah.
women,
Mhm.
but it didn't work.
It didn't work, huh?
For many reasons, we are very sensitive, this is nothing bad, it's just the way
Right.
that we are. We were crying in the same day,
Mhm.
and we were getting pregnant in the same
Right.
period of time, so a lot of things were happening, but I don't know how, I don't know, I mean, in Colombia, this is very interesting because we are free to choose any movement. For
Mhm.
example, if women want to be a feminist,
Yeah.
it's okay. But now that I have experienced that, and I know that is not good.
Right.
So, I mean, you need the balance.
Mhm.
I don't know what would happen here in the United States if someone, for example, if a CEO is a feminist
Yeah.
and if she decides to hire just women,
Mhm.
is that possible or not?
No, no, that's illegal too.
Okay.
Yeah, doesn't matter which way you slice it, it's illegal, right? And the whole point of us trying to balance the playing field is so that it doesn't, we don't have reverse discrimination, right? Which is another thing, right? When you are now, you used to be discriminated against, now you're the one doing the discriminating, that's reverse discrimination, right?
Oh.
And so that's kind of where that whole kind of path is gonna lead to, right? Where you say, oh, you know what? I'm a woman, I'm just gonna hire all women, and that's that, right? That's reverse discrimination, and that's illegal. Yeah, it's illegal here.
I was gonna say, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but I was thinking that maybe it might lead to selective, like, favoritism.
Okay, in what way? Like,
In the sense that, like, if somebody's trying to overly compensate, so I don't know how I would explain it.
Where it
So-
only apply like one, like specific race or something, right?
Yeah, so let's say like, there's a workplace and the manager or the higher up is a woman,
mhm,
but she has other employees that are men.
mhm,
So she might subconsciously or consciously favor women in that situation. So not just limited to men or women or anything, it's just an example. But like, it might lead to, like you said, a reverse racism.
Right.
I'm trying to say it might lead to favoritism towards a certain demographic or a certain.
yeah, that's what it is.
And that's-
It's favoritism at the end of the day, right? Based
And it
on
might be
gender.
legal as well. That's the.
Oh,
Because it, not in terms of hiring, but in terms of like giving out tasks and giving out jobs and stuff like that.
But that's when it's the employees to be like, hey, I don't feel this is fair, and that's where
Right.
it's, but like HR representatives would be like, hey, you need to stop this is how we
Yep.
can tell this.
Cause either way, it's not legal. It's not right.
But-
And it's the same thing, right? Again, like I said, minority is relative, right? You work in an organization where it's mostly women, you're the minority as the male, right? And if you feel like you're being treated in a certain way because you're male, then you can go to HR or your boss and say, hey, look, I feel like I'm getting mistreated because I'm a guy. And we need to stop this. If not, I'm gonna go to HR and I'm gonna go. And they have a legit case, right? Because we're trying to prevent that, because that's what happened to you as a woman, right? So we don't want you doing it, right? But again, we're only human. And people go that mindset, and it's not that it's a bad thing, because you wanna to build up the population, sometimes you have to kind of lean a little bit heavier on one side till you get it to where it's kind of level and then go back to being normal, right? So you may very well be, the first week is like, I'm only hiring women. Right? I'm only looking at women. And then after that, after you kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, I have enough women. Okay, now let me fill the rest of the spots with just whoever's qualified. All right? Who's qualified, and it doesn't matter the gender, right? You could get away with that in small doses, right? But eventually people are gonna start talking to each other and they're gonna be like, okay, and they're gonna look around and like, there's a lot of women around here. Right? Like, okay, I'm not too cool about this, all right? I need to say something, because if I don't, I'm gonna continue to get mistreated and this pattern will continue, this behavior will continue. And we don't want that because that's what we're trying to fight, because that's what happened before, right? It was about, oh, males, right? We're just gonna hire all men, right? And the women and everybody else go to the side. And then now women are like, nope, we got the power now, we're hiring all women. It's kind of, okay, you gotta kind of let that stuff kind of go by the wayside and just do what the right thing is, you know? Pick people based on merit and not based on anything else, all right? Because there's dumb and smart people in every race, ethnicity, gender, age. I've met a whole bunch of them, okay? Didn't matter, men, women, they bright, not bright, whatever the case may be. Yeah, but good question though, a good comment. You have something to say?
Oh, no, it's
Okay.
all
All right, so breaking the glass ceiling, right? So to go back to what you were saying, right? So when it comes to breaking the glass ceiling, sometimes companies will kind of go that way where they'll lean heavy on one side because they want to create such a huge population of that particular demographic so that you can't ignore it. Right? And then, so you have like 20 women at the executive level. All right, or you look at the executive level and go, man, 95% of the executive level are women. We have a lot of women. We got no choice. We gotta promote one of them, the CEO or CFO or something like that, right? And that's what it's gonna turn into. Because now you're just sticking at the bottom, not the bottom, but they're just sticking in a particular category, and no matter what, they're not moving. And people will start to notice that, like, okay, wait a minute, you brought someone external to the company to be CEO. When you have 15, 20 eligible candidates, right? Well qualified, probably overqualified for the job, but you decided because they're women that you're gonna go, go get a male, right? And it really is about the mindset of the person or the values that those particular group of people have, right? And so our society is kind of, it's in a weird place right now where it's like there's a fight for diversity, but there's also a fight for going back to traditional ways, right? Gender norms, right? Like, hey, you're a woman, you should be taking care of the kids, washing the car, not washing the car, washing the dishes, cooking dinner, that kind of thing, right? And then men go out and work, make the money, take out the trash, kind of do what you want whenever you feel like doing it, that kind of thing, right? So there's a battle kind of going on right now, and it's playing out as far as like progressive mindset and more traditionalist mindset and trying to figure out, okay, women want to be successful, women want to be CEOs, but they also want families, right? Right? And who's to say that you have to decide on one or the other? Because that's how it used to be back in the days. Women had to decide, you want to be a career, you want to have a career, or you want to have a family? Because you couldn't have both. It's not that you couldn't have both, it's just that they would make it so difficult to do both. Okay? If you were a woman and you had a family and you also were high up on the ladder, there'd be situations where like, well, we gotta stay late. Well, I gotta go pick my kids up. Okay, well, can't you call somebody? Can't you call your husband? Can't you call your sister? Can't you pay someone to go pick them up, whatever? Like, no, I want to be home with my kids, right? And so that would be a mark on you because like, well, I'm gonna go home instead of doing this work, right? Where, this is kind of another aspect of corporate America, work-life balance now is starting to take place. So there's a lot of things that are changing within the workspace that allow for people to kind of have it all. right? And now we have more house husbands and, you know, stuff like that, more women in power, all right, where at the highest levels, okay? More minorities in power, so things are definitely changing, right? For the better, I hope, but we'll see, all right? Okay, what time is it?
7:46.
7:46. I have gone past my allotted time. Okay, myself allotted time. All right, so, Ellie due tonight, okay, get him in. Grace period is pretty much over. All right, 11:59 for initial post. And then, next week, probably over the weekend, I'll put together these groups for the case study. If you have someone you want to work with specifically, let me know. I had 1 or 2 requests already. So let me know, send me an email like, hey, I want to work with such and such, and then I'll try my best to
Wouldn't that
accommodate.
be discrimination?
No, it's not discrimination, Kate. It's called Dr. Kate preferential treatment. No, Kate, you know what? I'm gonna find a good group.
Okay.
So if you have someone you prefer to work with or you know, kind of have sights on whatever mindset you guys have, let me know and I'll do my best to put you guys together. Aside from that, I will see you guys next week, you know, and have a good week. Finish up the rest of the PowerPoint, like probably 10 more slides left, and then that's it. Do the quiz, and hope everybody's doing all right. Yeah. Okay. I'll see you guys next week.
Business finally about to start, so
Yeah.
we get our equipment at the end of the month and start shooting.
Good. All right, cool. All right, Zoom. I'll see you later.
Bye.
All right.
That program.